It started on a Thursday. Cold rain dripped from the edges of Helen's umbrella, and her heels sank slightly into the mud outside the quiet little chapel. Her fingers trembled around the bouquet. The inside was dimly lit, empty. No guests, no music, no groom. Just like the last time. It was the 10th time Brian had proposed and the 10th time he hadn't followed through. Helen stood there for a while, alone in her white dress, watching the rain trickle down the stained glass windows. Her phone didn't ring. No apology, no excuse, not even a text. She didn't cry this time. Maybe the tears had dried up after the 5th time. Or maybe after the 7th, when she'd still believed he was just scared or confused. But it wasn't confusion. It was him. Always full of words but empty on the follow-through. Helen left the church without looking back. That night, she sat by the window of her apartment, watching the traffic blur into streaks of color. A ring lay on the table beside her. She didn't remember when he gave her this one. Maybe it was the 8th proposal, or the 9th. They'd all started blending together. Each time he swore it was real. Each time he cried actual tears and promised, "This time, I mean it." Every time, she'd believed him, and every time, he disappeared right before the altar. She wasn't stupid. She was in love, and love makes you see what you want, not what's there. That night, something inside her finally snapped into place. It didn't break, it settled. She picked up the ring and tossed it into the trash without hesitation. Then she booked a flight. 3 months passed. She didn't tell anyone where she went, not even Melissa, her best friend since childhood. She left her phone, closed all her socials, and disappeared into a warm little coastal town in Portugal. A bakery job, a small cottage by the water, and sunrises that didn't remind her of Brian. It took that long to find herself again. And when she did, when she stopped flinching at love songs and wedding dresses, Helen came home, reborn. She was done crying, back in her city. She didn't tell Brian she was back. She didn't have to. William, her friend from university who now worked as a therapist, bumped into her at a coffee shop and almost dropped his espresso. "God, Helen," he breathed. "You're glowing." She laughed. "Must be the sunlight diet." They talked for hours. He'd always had a calm, safe presence, the kind that made people feel heard. With William, there was no pressure, no tears, no begging, just truth. He didn't ask her why she left, but when she told him anyway, his jaw clenched. 10 times, he said, low, "Jesus, Helen, that's not love, that's control." She nodded slowly. She knew now. Weeks passed, then months. William and Helen started spending more time together, quietly, naturally. Melissa was delighted to have her friend back, but suspiciously curious. "So, what about Brian?" Helen shrugged. "I'm over him." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "For real this time?" Helen nodded, dead serious. But love has a cruel sense of timing. The invitation came in a pale blue envelope with her name written in Brian's handwriting. "Come to the wedding. It's you. This time, I swear, no more mistakes, no more fear. Just meet me at the altar, please." Helen's hands trembled again, just like the first proposal, just like every disappointment after. Melissa snatched the letter from her. "You've got to be kidding me. He's serious," Helen murmured. "I can feel it. That's what you said the last 9 times. But this time was different, not because he meant it, but because she had changed." Helen walked into the chapel on the day of the wedding in a satin white gown, veil lightly pinned. The place was full this time. Guests were seated. Music was playing. Melissa stood at her side, unsure, arms folded, and Brian was at the altar. He smiled when he saw her. Nervous, hopeful. His hands shook. Helen walked straight down the aisle, then stopped. Halfway, she turned around and left. People gasped. Brian's face crumbled. The music stuttered and died. Melissa caught up with Helen outside, breathless and wide-eyed. What just happened?" Helen smiled, almost peacefully. "I kept my promise." "What promise?" "I said I'd meet him at the altar." Melissa blinked. "And I didn't say I'd stay." She took a deep breath of fresh air, sunlight, warming her skin. News spread fast to fast. By evening, Helen's phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages poured in from people she hadn't heard from in years. Some were stunned, some applauded, others didn't even bother to hide their judgment. "You humiliated him. He waited for you this time. You could have at least talked to him first." But Helen didn't respond to any of them. She had no words left for explanations. Not for people who hadn't seen her fall apart 10 times before. Brian called, of course. 6 times, left for voicemails. The first two sounded confused, like he couldn't believe it. The third turned angry, almost bitter. The fourth, he cried, "Please, Helen, you knew I was serious. I was there. You saw me. I was standing there for you. Please just call me back. I love you. I've always loved you." She deleted all 4 without listening to the ends. Melissa came over that night with wine and a bag of Chinese food. She dropped onto the couch beside Helen and shoved noodles into her mouth. "So, that was dramatic." Helen raised an eyebrow. "You disapprove? Are you kidding? I almost clapped when you walked out. Half those people were on their phones like they were watching a damn reality show. I swear." One guy even whispered, "I knew she'd ditch him." Helen laughed quietly. "Seriously?" Melissa nodded. "You made history. Brian's gonna need therapy for a decade." Helen sipped her wine. "He should have started 10 years ago." They fell into a long silence, comfortable, almost peaceful. But eventually, Melissa glanced over, eyes softening. "Are you okay though? Really okay?" "I think I am," Helen said, and she meant it. There was no guilt, no second guessing, just release. She had expected to feel something intense, regret maybe, or pity, but there was only calm. She slept better that night than she had in years. The next day, she walked to the small bookstore around the corner, the same place she used to go when Brian forgot their dates or canceled last minute. The smell of old pages always comforted her. The owner, an older woman named Mrs. Adler, greeted her like an old friend. "I saw you on the news," she said gently, handing Helen a cup of chamomile tea. "That took guts." Helen smiled, a little embarrassed. "Everyone keeps saying that. They should. Men like Brian, they don't love you. They just hate the idea of losing you." Those words stuck with her. That evening, William showed up at her apartment with a crooked grin and a gift bag. "Survived the fallout?" "Barely." He handed her the bag. Inside was a tiny ceramic figure, a bride in running shoes. Helen burst out laughing. "Where did you even find this?" "Custom ordered. One of a kind. Just like you." There was a pause. Then he sat down beside her, a little closer than usual. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. "But I need to ask, what's next?" She turned to him. "Next? For you? You've walked away from a man you spent years trying to fix. That kind of freedom leaves a gap." She nodded slowly. "I want something real, something quiet, peaceful, no begging, no chasing, just 2 people who see each other clearly." William's eyes didn't leave hers. "I think you already found that." Helen didn't answer. She just leaned her head on his shoulder. For once, she didn't feel like something was missing. And miles away, in his dim apartment, Brian sat alone with a bottle of whiskey. Photos of Helen covered the coffee table. Her smile, her letters, his proposals. Every moment he'd ever used to convince himself she'd come back. He didn't cry this time. He just stared, because deep down, he finally understood he hadn't lost her at the altar. He'd been losing her all along. The next few weeks passed with an almost unreal quiet. For the first time in a long time, Helen's life wasn't revolving around waiting. Not waiting for a call, not waiting for someone to show up, not waiting for love to finally feel like love. She and William grew closer without trying. He never pressed, never leaned too far into her space. He was just there. He listened, cooked with her, even helped her repaint her living room one sunny afternoon. He didn't ask for anything in return, and that, ironically, made her want to give him everything. But part of her still hesitated. Healing isn't a light switch, it's a slow unpeeling of walls built over years. William seemed to know that. He gave her space without ever leaving her side. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Brian showed up at her door. She opened it without checking the peephole, something she regretted the moment she saw him standing there, slightly unshaven, his eyes hollow. "Helen," he said quietly. She didn't speak. She didn't move. He took a step forward. "Can I come in?" "No," she said, firm and steady. "You can say what you need from there." Brian rubbed his jaw, glancing down at the ground like a child being scolded. "I know I ruined everything," he began. "I know I broke you, but I came to say I'm sorry. For all of it. The proposals, the tears, the false hope. I thought I loved you." Helen's heart thudded once. "Thought? I didn't love you," he said bluntly. "Not really." I loved having you. I loved how you made me feel safe, admired, important. She swallowed hard, and I used that. Every time I begged you to stay, I told myself I was trying to be better. But the truth is, I just couldn't bear the idea of someone else loving you better than me. The silence between them grew heavy. Helen didn't interrupt. She wanted to hear all of it. I never planned to leave you at the altar. Not once. But I'd get there and freeze. Because I knew, deep down, I didn't deserve you. And if I married you, I'd have to actually try to be worthy of you. I wasn't ready for that. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, breathing slowly. Brian looked up finally. I saw the way you looked at that guy William after you walked out. You didn't even look back at me. And I knew. Knew what? That you were gone for good. She nodded once. I was gone the moment I realized I didn't owe you another chance. He winced, but he nodded too. I hope you're happy, he said, voice hoarse. I already am, she said simply. Brian didn't ask to stay. He turned and walked down the hall, not looking back. Helen closed the door and stood there, still for a long moment. Then she exhaled deep, long final. That night, she called William. I need you, she said, without hesitation. I'm already on my way, he replied. When he arrived, she didn't speak. She just pulled him into a slow, silent hug. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. They sat on her balcony under the stars. William passed her a mug of hot cocoa, their fingers brushing. Tell me something honest, she said suddenly. He looked at her. I love you. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't flinch. She only smiled. Tell me something harder, she whispered. He hesitated, then said, I'm afraid you'll still go back to him someday. Helen leaned her head on his shoulder again. I won't, she said. You're the first person I ever chose without being broken first. The stars above them didn't flicker or fall. They just stayed, quiet, steady. It wasn't the dramatic kind of love that Helen had grown used to, the kind that came with shouting matches, dramatic makeups, late night calls drenched in apologies. What she had with William was slow, steady. It moved like warm water instead of wildfire, and it scared her sometimes, because quiet meant real. Quiet meant nothing to hide behind. One Friday evening, they were cooking together in Helen's apartment. She was chopping bell peppers while William stirred pasta sauce. The kitchen was full of little noises, the sizzle of garlic, the hum of soft jazz from the speaker, the clink of spoons in ceramic bowls. Then William asked, almost casually, do you ever miss him? Helen paused. The knife hovered over the cutting board. She didn't answer right away. Sometimes, she said softly, but not in the way you'd think. William waited, stirring in slow, careful circles. I don't miss him. I miss the version of me that believed in what we had. The blind, reckless part of me that thought love meant waiting, hurting, forgiving over and over. That girl thought she was strong, but really, she was just scared of being alone. William said nothing, just reached over and gently squeezed her hand. I'm not scared anymore, Helen added. Good, he murmured. Because you've never been alone. After dinner, they ended up on the couch again, legs tangled, wine glasses forgotten on the table. Helen played with the sleeve of his sweater, her mind drifting. Do you think people like Brian ever really change? She asked. William tilted his head. Not unless life breaks their illusion. Some people mistake guilt for growth. They apologize, but they don't understand. And understanding, that's the part that actually changes you. Helen nodded. He apologized. He cried, but it still felt like he was mourning his loss, not mine. Exactly. The conversation lingered with her even after William left. She lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, remembering all the times Brian had made her feel like her pain was inconvenient, like her anger was just overreaction. But now, she wasn't angry, she was just done. The next day, Melissa dragged her to a small art exhibit downtown. You need color in your life, she said. You've been living in soft grays since forever. The gallery buzzed with soft conversation and the occasional clink of wine glasses. Abstract paintings lined the walls, some bright and chaotic, others calm and soulful. Helen found herself drawn to a canvas splashed with harsh reds and slashes of black. The title read, Love is a Battlefield, and I lost. She stared at it for a long time, then Melissa whispered, That's what you looked like a year ago. Helen turned to her, surprised. You used to walk around like you were apologizing for taking up space, Melissa said. Now, you walk like you own the space. You don't even notice it. But people look at you differently. Helen didn't know what to say to that. Compliments like that never landed easily. Later that evening, she went home alone. William had gone to a conference for the weekend, and the silence in the apartment felt different now. Not empty, just hers. She poured herself tea, lit a candle, and curled up on the couch with a book. A few pages in, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Curious, she opened the message. I know it's over, but I wanted you to know. I'm leaving town, starting over. I'm sorry I hurt you. I hope you find everything you were looking for. Brian? She stared at it for a minute, then deleted it, not out of anger, but because it wasn't hers to carry anymore. That night, sleep came easy, dreamless, peaceful. William returned on Sunday evening, suitcase in one hand, a bouquet of orange tulips in the other. Helen opened the door barefoot, in a hoodie and pajama pants, her hair in a loose knot. She looked sleepy and radiant, for the girl who doesn't need flowers, he said, but deserves them anyway. She grinned, pulling him into a hug so warm and long, he didn't want to let go. They cooked dinner together again, this time humming along to an old Stevie Wonder song. The mood was light, but there was something different in the air. Not tension, intimacy. The kind that had nothing to do with sex or grand gestures. Just two people quietly leaning into each other. After dinner, they sat on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch. He pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket. Helen stared. He noticed and smiled. Not what you think. He opened it. Inside was a key, just a simple house key. My lease ends next month, he said, his voice steady. No pressure, no rush. Just, if you want to build something new, I want it to be with you. Helen touched the key, her fingers lingering. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't a ring wrapped in tears and apologies. It was a choice, and it felt more real than any proposal she'd ever had. She didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. William didn't expect it. He just closed the box gently and set it beside her. They watched a movie after that, some indie romance that ended in heartbreak and snow. Helen leaned her head on William's chest, and he absently traced circles on her arm. She hadn't known love could feel like this, like breathing, like silence without emptiness. That night, while he slept next to her, she held the key in her hand for a long time before placing it in the drawer beside her bed. The next day, she went back to the bookstore. Mrs. Adler greeted her with a knowing smile. You're glowing again. Helen laughed. People keep saying that. I should probably check if it's radiation. Mrs. Adler chuckled. It's peace, sweetheart. It looks good on you. Helen wandered through the aisles and picked out a few books. On her way out, she noticed a flyer pinned near the door. Writer's Workshop, reclaiming your voice through story. She froze for a second, then tore the flyer off the board and folded it into her pocket. Later, she told William about it over coffee. I used to write, back when I was younger. Before everything became about waiting. You should go, he said immediately. Write it all, let it out. So she did. The workshop was full of people carrying their own scars, some fresh, some faded. Helen listened to stories of abuse, betrayal, regret, and for the first time, she shared hers. Not the story of being left at the altar, the story of staying after the first lie, the story of shrinking to fit someone else's idea of love. When she read her piece aloud, her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. After class, a woman approached her, middle-aged, quiet. She didn't say much, just hugged Helen tightly. Thank you, she whispered. I needed that. Helen cried in her car that night, but they weren't the same tears Brian used to coax out of her. These were tears of release, of reclaiming, of finally stepping into the woman she was always meant to be. Fall crept in softly, and with it came golden leaves, cool breezes, and the scent of something changing, not just in the air, but in Helen herself. Her mornings were slower now. Coffee brewed without rush. No panic texts, no anxious pacing by the phone. Her life no longer moved to the rhythm of someone else's uncertainty. She attended the writing workshop every Tuesday night, sometimes staying after just to talk, sometimes just to sit in silence with people who knew what it meant to have been broken and rebuilt. One night after class, the instructor, a sharp-eyed woman named Nadia, pulled Helen aside. Have you ever thought about publishing? She asked. Helen blinked. Publishing what? Your story, your pieces. Your voice has weight. People feel it. The idea made Helen nervous. Not because she didn't want it, but because, for so long, she hadn't believed she had anything worth saying. I'll think about it, she said quietly. Nadia nodded. Don't take too long. The world needs women who stopped waiting. That night, Helen sat in bed, staring at her laptop screen. She opened a blank document and typed the title. He proposed with tears, but left me waiting 10 times. Then she wrote until tears running down her face and laughter shaking her shoulders at random moments. She poured out years of confusion, pain, the hollow feeling of being adored one day and discarded the next. And finally, she wrote the part where she left. Not in rage, not for revenge, but with grace. With finality. When she was done, she felt lighter than she'd ever felt in her life. William noticed the change the next day. You're glowing again, he teased, handing her a cup of coffee. I think I might be falling in love with myself, she said, smiling at him over the rim of her mug. He leaned in. I called that months ago. Then he added, more seriously, I've been thinking about something. Helen raised an eyebrow. This sounds serious. He sat beside her a little nervous. I don't want to just be your piece, Helen. I want to be your partner. Through the mess, the quiet, the days when you doubt everything, including us. I don't want to fix you. I want to grow with you. It wasn't a proposal, but it was better. She cupped his face, kissed him softly, and whispered, then let's grow something worth keeping. In the days that followed, they started house hunting. Not because they were rushing, but because it felt right. Like planting a seed in healthy soil. Brian had not reached out again. Rumor had it he moved out of state, joined some startup, started dating a woman who looked suspiciously like Helen but younger, blonder, and maybe more willing to bend. Helen didn't feel anything about it. Not pity, not anger, just nothing. She even bumped into one of his old friends at a bookstore once. He looked surprised to see her, then blurted, You really left him, huh? Helen just smiled. No, I chose myself. A few days later, her piece from the workshop got picked up by a small online literary journal. The editor wrote back, This isn't just a breakup story. This is a survival anthem. The day it went live, Helen sat with William and Melissa at their favorite cafe, watching the comments come in. Strangers wrote things like, I felt every word of this. This was me, 6 years ago. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Helen didn't reply to them all, but she read every single one. Melissa leaned over and nudged her shoulder. You know what you are now. Helen looked up. What? A woman who taught the world that walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only way to survive. Helen reached across the table and took William's hand. She had walked away from a man who couldn't choose her, and found a life where she finally could. The following month brought a quiet sense of settling. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself with fireworks, but rather with a deep breath at the end of the day and the slow realization that the war inside you has stopped. Helen and William moved into a small 2-bedroom house just outside the city, a place with creaky floors, big windows, and a backyard where the light fell soft in the evenings. They spent their first night there without any furniture, lying on the floor with blankets, pizza, and laughter echoing off the empty walls. I love it already, William said, staring up at the ceiling like it held stars. Helen smiled. It feels like something real, something earned. They painted the walls together over the next few weekends, each color chosen slowly. No rush, no arguments. They filled the house with second-hand furniture, mismatched mugs, a growing collection of books and memories. They didn't have to question. Helen framed the printed version of her story and hung it above her writing desk. It didn't feel like a trophy. It felt like a promise to never go back to silence again. One evening, as autumn deepened, Helen got a call from an unfamiliar number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. A woman's voice came through, soft and slow. Is this Helen Carter? Yes. Who's this? My name's Layla. I found your article through a friend. I hope this isn't strange, but I think I'm the woman Brian's seeing now. Helen sat down slowly. Layla continued. I'm not calling to start anything. I wanted to say thank you. Thank me? Yeah. Her voice broke a little. Because your story helped me see what I was pretending not to. He's doing it to me too. All the empty promises, the crying, the guilt tripping. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was crazy. Helen's throat tightened. You're not crazy, she said gently. You're just where I was. And it hurts like hell. Layla exhaled shakily. I'm leaving tomorrow. I already packed. I wanted you to know your story saved me from giving him another chance. Helen sat with that for a long while after the call ended. She told William later that night, and he held her without speaking, just letting the silence speak for them both. Sometimes healing isn't just for you. Sometimes it echoes out and softens someone else's fall. That weekend, they hosted a small housewarming dinner. Melissa came early, wine in hand, and spun around the living room dramatically. You've gone full domestic, she teased. I barely recognize you. I barely recognize me, Helen said, smiling. Later, over dessert, Melissa pulled her aside. Do you still think about him? Helen didn't hesitate. No, but I do remember who I was when I loved him. And I'll never forget how hard I had to fight to stop. Melissa raised her glass. To the fight, to the freedom after. Helen added, when everyone left, and the house fell quiet again, William walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and whispered, I love this life we're building. Even when I cry about strangers on the phone, especially then. That's the woman I fell in love with. She turned in his arms, resting her forehead against his. I think I've finally learned the difference, she said softly, between someone who loves having me and someone who just loves me. William smiled. And which one am I? You? She whispered. You're the only one who ever stayed without asking me to shrink. The wind rustled through the trees outside. Inside, it was warm, safe, and she knew she was never going back. Winter arrived quietly, the kind that didn't bring heavy snow or blizzards, just a soft chill in the air, bare trees, and a stillness that made everything feel like it was waiting. But for once, Helen wasn't. She had stopped waiting for closure, stopped waiting for validation, stopped waiting for someone to finally choose her the right way, because she had already chosen herself. The final piece of her healing came in the form of something unexpected. A letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. Handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a short, typed note. I saw your story. I don't know if you remember me, but I was at the second wedding. I was the guy working the lights. I watched you stand there alone. I've never forgotten your face. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay now. I hope you found someone who never made you wait. Helen folded the letter carefully and placed it in the same drawer where the old key still sat untouched. Not because she hadn't used it. She had. William had copied it and given her a new one, something sturdier, something theirs, but the original, that stayed, a symbol of the moment her life changed. She finally published a collection of essays titled Leave When the Tears Become Routine. The response stunned her. Letters, emails, messages from women and men all over the world. Some wrote in pain, some in gratitude, others in freedom. The book wasn't about Brian. Not really. It was about how long people stay in places that hurt, and how hard it is to walk away from a version of love you spent years convincing yourself was real. She was invited to speak on a panel at a women's empowerment conference. Melissa went with her, sitting in the front row, tearing up when Helen stood at the podium. I was proposed to 10 times, Helen told the crowd. Each time I said yes, and each time, he didn't show up. But the most painful part wasn't the waiting, it was that I kept forgiving what should have never been asked to be forgiven. The room fell into silence. I left him at the altar. On the 11th try, not to hurt him, but to save myself. I walked away, not because I stopped loving him but because I finally started loving me. Applause erupted. Some women stood. Afterward, strangers came up to hug her. A few cried. One whispered, "You made me realize it's okay to stop waiting." When she and William got back home that night, the porch light was on, and the house glowed like something alive. She slipped off her heels, walked barefoot through their little kitchen, and sat down with him on the floor like they used to do. You were amazing, he said. I almost cried, she admitted. I almost did too. Don't tell anyone. They laughed quietly. Then Helen looked at him, really looked at him. I don't want a proposal, she said. William blinked, surprised. Okay. I don't want rings, ceremonies, dresses, or promises made in front of strangers. He nodded slowly. So, what do you want? She leaned in, brushing her lips against his. This, just this, you, me, every day. No performance, no proving, just the choice. He kissed her back with a kind of understanding words couldn't hold. And that was their love story. No altar. No audience. Just two people who met each other in the quiet aftermath of ruin and decided they'd had enough of waiting. They built a life, brick by emotional brick, and it never had to be loud to be real, because she had been proposed to with tears, but now, she was finally living without them. The end.